friends, welcome back to another episode of Guidance with Gap. Today I had the pleasure of speaking with Summer Huntington, who is the founder of Steel Mace Vinyasa, as well as Flow Shala, which is a movement studio in Washington. She is so down to earth and easy to talk to, really good at explaining everything and going back into the history of yoga poses and all that fun stuff. We talk a lot about what Steel Mace Vinyasa really is, because going into it, I didn't even know what it was. And it was really cool learning the backstory of a lot of the poses that I'm even teaching in my classes. It's definitely a learning experience for me. We also talk about some yoga business stuff, which is awesome if you are, interested in any type of business, to be honest. And one of my favorite topics was talking about the chakras and the little flows that she has. She has each week at her studio, she does a chakra, and we kind of break down how one would look different from the other and how that experience goes. She's also a badass, hosting a bunch of different retreats in some dope ass places. So I hope you guys tune in and enjoy it as much as I did. So welcome. Today we have Summer Huntington, the founder of Steel Mace Vinyasa, which is Asana training systems, and the owner of Flow Shala, a movement studio that focuses on steel mace, mobility, flow, and HIIT trainings. So welcome.
Thank you. It's so good to be here. I'm excited to talk all the things flow with you.
Oh yeah, let's get flowy. So to just start people off with the basics, what is Steel Mace?
Sure. Steel Mace Vinyasa is a system that I founded in 2017, and it's actually the second loaded asana conditioning system that I created. I created another system in 2011 called kinesiology yoga, and where we were using these like 3 and 5 pound, imagine like a little tiny baseball bat, and taking yoga flow with this little bat in your hand, kind of moving through the asana and moving through the transitions with a light load, different than like yoga sculpt where you're using a dumbbell. So Steel Mace Vinyasa is a very specific conditioning system designed with a steel mace. And the steel mace is derived from an ancient weapon called the gada. If you look in Indian history and Persian history, you see a lot of the Hindu deities wielding these large gada tools that look kind of like a club or a weapon of some kind. And so this is truly bringing back the original weaponry that was involved in yoga that a lot of yogis don't really know about. So I have a performance background. I have a master's in kinesiology. And so I had been studying clubs for quite a while with my coach, who's a master flow coach. And I was doing my 200-hour and then my 500-hour yoga teacher training. And I had private clients. So I was like strictly private coaching, one-on-ones, private training, private yoga. And I started kind of merging the two together. And yeah, Steel Mace Vinyasa has been a continually evolving system that I love to just teach everyday people that are not necessarily yogis, although yogis love it too. But yeah, it's basically cross-training meets yoga with clubs and ancient weaponry.
I love it. As a yoga instructor, I didn't even know about the clubs and like the history of all of that. I think a lot of times that gets a little left out from the training. It's very much like the poses, how to get people into them, alignment and stuff like that. So it's super cool. I love that you went back and drew something from history and kind of brought it to present day, because that's really where we came from. That's honoring our past, honoring our ancestors. How did you first kind of come up with this idea? Was it already introduced to you, or you just kind of one day were like, I'm going to create this whole new vinyasa flow?
Great question. So when I was about 22 years old, I was a nanny for a family, and I happened to, the universe brought me coincidentally to this person who was a very influential martial artist and flow coach. And they founded they patented this device called the club bell. And now the club bell is sold all around the world by different manufacturers. But back then, this is like 16, 17 years ago, this was the only company that had a club bell. And so that's like a name brand. Now people call them steel clubs. But I was really fortunate to be able to like nanny for this family. And then they asked me, the husband, who is the flow coach, my coach, Scott Sonnen, You can look up Scott Sonnon, Sonnon. He invited me to be a model for his, I'm going to date myself here, for his club and Steel Club or Club Bell Encyclopedia
Oh,
DVD.
wow.
And so I was like a model, and I got coached by Scott to like learn all these weird movements I had never seen before. And I was doing like side swings and all these rhythmic exercises with these mini clubs, these like 5-pound clubs. So long story short, I started coming to his seminars, and people would fly in from all around the world. There was high-level faculty coaches there. The founder of Gold Medal Bodies was there, Ryan Hurst. I've met a lot of really amazing coaches through that community. And then I became a director for Club Bell Yoga. So I founded Club Bell Yoga, which is also kinesiology yoga, the generic name versus like the brand name, because people don't always know what a Club Bell is. So I worked for them was a contractor and director, global director for 7 years before I founded Flow Shala. And so I was traveling. I produced all my own seminars. I would get invited overseas to teach this in faraway places like Spain and Budapest and London and Australia. So I've literally been all around the world teaching this stuff. And after a while, I was like, you know what? I think I need to create another system, because the Steel Mace is now a popularized tool. So then I started seeing Steel Mace, and there was all these like flow artists, and they're male. So like up until then, I hadn't ever seen anybody doing loaded asana conditioning with any sort of tool, especially a mace. Mace were not common when I first started seeing it back in 2015. And so I reached out to some of these people I would see on Instagram, and was like, oh my gosh, like we got to talk. We're doing the same thing. And so it kind of was this synergy of learning about the mace and how it differs from the club. And it's just been this whole journey. And there's so much history too about clubs and gada and mace. So it's kind of this never ending personal growth hero's journey that I'm on to keep learning and mastering this tool.
Yeah, I love that it's almost like following your path as well. Like the more that the business is growing and the more that this little flow is evolving, you are too. It's like a nice little trail. I love it. What was I going to ask? I don't know where the question went. It was, I was going to say, is it similar to fit classes? Because I know that a lot of studios down here in Florida, we have a lot of weighted classes where they're just incorporating dumbbells and pretty much that's it into a yoga class. So would it be kind of similar to that?
Great question. So a lot of people kind of think that yoga sculpt and Steel Mace Vinyasa are the same. They are absolutely 100% different, because dumbbells are conventional and Steel Mace and weaponry training is unconventional. And if you look at the apparatus, when you hold a dumbbell, you basically make a hook with your fingers and you don't really have to engage much. You can just like hook it and kind of swing weight around, and you're doing these conventional like bicep curls and tricep things and all this stuff. The movements in Steel Mace Vinyasa are derived from martial arts and from the actual classical club swinging exercises like 360 swings, drop swings, single-handed mills. If you don't know these terminology, go to my YouTube, Summer Huntington, and I've got tons of tutorials on this stuff. But it's really about moving a object through space, so proprioception, and we're wielding it like a weapon, because this tool was derived from ancient warriors as a tool to prepare them for battle. Right. And so we're conjuring up these similar movements where warriors use these to actually train to protect their family and their village. So we're taking these moves like uppercut lunge or lateral lunge or Shaolin wrist control, all these movements that actually were conditioning the warrior to be able to fight and protect their livelihood. And so something kind of happens and shifts when you get a mace in your hands that I definitely don't think happens when you get a little pink dumbbell in your hands. You kind of feel like a badass, and there's just so much more complexity in it too. So they're really night and day different.
Yeah, I'm definitely intrigued. I want to try it for sure, because last night, I went to my first kickboxing class, and I've always been an athlete. And then I came down here and I became like, the more Zen yoga instructor. And being in the class just fired up that like warrior, that warrior energy of like, I feel good in here. I feel fired up. And to have a space where you could combine the warrior energy and the yoga energy and just be this like flowing badass sounds awesome.
Yeah, it gets pretty addictive, so watch out.
Yeah. Is that kind of what you're teaching besides just like the asana flow?
Yeah, that's definitely a piece of it. I think that kind of comes later. So when you look at it from like a yoga perspective, if you're used to going to a yoga asana class, you generally move through poses with breath. And you're holding these shapes that require a certain amount of stability and a certain amount of flexibility. You've got your power poses that are standing on 2 feet. Think of all your warrior poses, which most yogis don't know are actually derived from actual warriors that train for battle. Like having your hands overhead is actually we hold a mace overhead, and it's actually to protect your skull from a sword flying into your crown of head. And so the hands being up like that, there used to be something in the hands. And so, anyway. So we basically look at, okay, OG yoga is just going to take us through asana. It's going to be great. And from a performance standpoint, it's great for peace, like parasympathetic nervous system, increasing breath control and getting relaxed, and then getting more mobile and more flexible. Whereas Steel Mace Vinyasa complements the yoga practice because it's more of a moderate to high intensity cross training day, which really incorporates a lot of aspects of functional movement training. So we're looking at how do we load the asana appropriately so that we can build more stability in the postures and more strength and actually see our muscle definition change. Because if we're just over specializing in yoga asana, we become over specialized in that as our sport. And so it's really important to have a comprehensive wellness coaching plan with a goal in mind. And so we're looking at how do we reverse engineer our movement goals, whether that's a mobility goal or strength goal or a performance goal, and how can we get more functional and have more power in all of these positions. So essentially, think of like a 60-minute class. You're going to be doing like yoga-based warm-up in the first 20 minutes, a 30-minute conditioning chunk where we're utilizing different HIIT protocols, high-intensity interval training protocols, and we're learning how to move with the mace, generally just 4 to 5 exercises done in a progressive way, like the simplest one, then more complex, moving through. So the conditioning chunk, 30 minutes, and then we follow it with loaded flow at the end where you get to do an actual like vinyasa flow with the mace in your hand, and then you take the mace away. So that final unloaded or unweighted flow is really where the flow state pops in, because you're like, whoa, everything got so much easier. My body knows exactly where to go. Everything's turned on. And so it's this very precise formula of prime, condition, and flow that over time we've seen everyday people that don't have a yoga background, they get better at yoga more quickly. They understand the postures more quickly because we're conditioning them, and they're learning the bite-sized chunks of these poses with a little load. So it's basically like the nerdiest version of yoga conditioning you could ever imagine. Sprinkle in a little warrior, sprinkle in a little flow state, nerd science. Yeah, that's
Yeah, that is so cool. I've never seen a class like that. I've never been to a class like that. Are you the only person that kind of offers it, or are you the only is Flow Shala the only place, or can it be found anywhere else?
Sure. So Club Bell Yoga is definitely global. Steel Mace Vinyasa is a global program. We started Flow Shala in 2017, and we were the world's only flagship Club Bell and Steel Mace and Rad Mobility studio. So yes, it's very unique. And I do 100-hour teacher training, and most of my clients are private one-on-one coaches. And so oftentimes they're working with just a private clientele, or they're teaching workshops at their studio. But as far as I know, Flow Shala is the only, like you walk in and everything's Steel Mace Vinyasa like oriented. There's other like low intensity classes. But yeah, we're pioneering it, and our virtual community is growing. We have members that train with us from all around the country and the world because we are the only studio. So my hope is that more Flow Shalas will pop up and we'll partner with other people. But yeah, I think there's one of our students has a studio called Electron in California, and she's very, very into Steel Mace Vinyasa. And then another coach, Vinny, in Brazil just opened a flow studio. So it's happening, but it takes time.
Yeah, that's going to be so exciting to see all of that just kind of flow and more people to get introduced to it, because I know it'll be a hit, and to bring people back to the roots too is what's going to be most rewarding. I mean, at least that's how I would feel. Do you think that it has I know average yoga or the more typical yoga is a combination, a lot of the mind, the breath, taps into emotions a little bit as well. Would you say Steel Mace also taps into the emotional side, or is it more physical?
That's a great question. So most people come to Steel Mace Vinyasa because they're really attracted to the tool and they just want to like master the mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
But we slide in the somatic education into it. All of the coaches that do our teacher training are educated on the fight or flight response and sympathetic versus parasympathetic nervous system, and also tuning into somatic sensation while training. And so I think that's really a big thing that differentiates our class protocols, is that we are actually coaching not just woo or like feel, like this generic blanket term of feel your mind body connection. We're actually cueing for what is the somatic feedback coming from each energetic center. And so the way our studio works is we go through a 6-week cycle of the chakras every single week. We start with root, then we go to sacral chakra, solar plexus, heart, throat, and then we combine the crown and third eye as the 6th week. And so we're training on this consistent cycle to allow our students to condition that area, because oftentimes if we've had trauma or if we are deconditioned in an area, or we're just not in touch with our emotions in a certain area, through conditioning it, you have no choice but to actually activate the musculature around it. And so through actively activating the fascia as well as the musculoskeletal system in a particular area and then rooting down to the core, we start to cultivate a deeper relationship with somatic sensation. And so we systematically go through every 6 weeks each of those energetic centers from a non-dogmatic viewpoint that's very much science-based, so that people that don't speak the language of, you know, chanting or spirituality of yoga, they're just building their toolbox for understanding what is somatic sensation and how can I pay attention to that area and condition it. And then over time, as the layers of restriction start to lessen and you start to get more and more mobile in those areas and more expansive in those areas, you start to tune into different things that show up. So yeah, it's very much a full, well-rounded practice around that integrates flow state, somatics, and the kinesiology of yoga.
I think that's a great bridge that you explain there for the people that don't speak the woo language, to how do I tap into that? What am I feeling? Because it is hard to speak to a class that may not understand their emotions in their body, and you know how emotions come up physically as well. So I think that's a great thing that you're doing, and helping and guiding people to learn that on a little more simple level. So what would a difference be between, let's say, a root chakra flow for the first week and like a heart chakra flow? Like what differences would be seen in a class like that?
Root versus heart. So for root work, we're generally looking at how do we stand in the foot fascia and how does the foot fascia connect to the pelvic floor fascia. And we're looking at the coccyx and then a lot of glute work. And so most yogis, if you look at yogis' physiology or their body, you see that their backside oftentimes is really flat. Call it the pancake yoga booty. So it's because there's no call for engagement in that area, and there's no extra load. And when we do our squats and things like that, or our lunges, we're not calling upon this extra layer of like deep activation in the glutes. And so root chakra is all about, you know, conditioning the glutes and pairing the glute activation with deep pelvic floor activation. So I find that the glute complex is truly like the powerhouse of our stance. And so if our tail is tucked under because we have a yogi pancake bum because we've never conditioned our glutes, when the tail is tucked under, that actually starts to map into our posture as fear. So think of a dog with the tail between the legs, right? Or if somebody breaks into your house, you curl up into a ball, right? So there's this posture related with fear. And so as you start to train that complex, you're starting to empower your stance a bit more. You're starting to really own like where you're at in your body. And so I think it's just really imperative to learn how to stand with good posture and really stand like a warrior. And then heart chakra might look like a lot more shoulder work. So a lot of folks have like shoulders rounded forward or limited shoulder range of motion or injuries from shoulders, dislocations and things like that. So shoulder, I pair a lot of our heart chakra work with either shoulder focus, so building arm endurance in all different ranges of motion, you know, priming the rotator cuff, allowing the scapula to wing and tip appropriately, and freeing up the shoulder if they're gummed up, you know, working in ranges that don't cause pain or you to go into fight or flight. So it's a lot of work with shoulders, and then also thoracic spine mobility is huge in the heart chakra. And so we have probably over 100 exercises that really like zone into all of these focuses. And so we train thoracic mobility with things like side swings or twisted runner's lunge with the club. Or so imagine if you're training thoracic mobility, you might be doing like a lunge with your right leg forward, your left leg back, and then you have one hand on the ground, and then you're holding your club or your mace, and you're just swinging up to vertical and then swinging back down. So it's this tiny little bit of load that your thoracic spine gets to rotate in. And by recruiting the musculature in the obliques, as well as loosening up dense fascia in the thoracic spine and activating the shoulders, what happens when you do like a 90-second interval, 45 seconds on each side of doing that repetition with a little bit of load, you can do things like the yogi lunge, the crescent lunge with twist a lot easier because you've primed that pattern and you've conditioned it, and now the asana is more accessible. So we start with the body as like the cornerstone of practice. And then as students are ready, they'll start to hear the other layers, and especially our teachers in training, like we're teaching the deeper concepts throughout the whole thing. But it's really just looking at like, all right, this body part is correlated to this chakra, but there's all this musculature around it that I'm going to condition into facilitate a deeper mind-body connection.
So would you say that that's something that going through the chakras each week, is that something that you do more specifically at your studio, or is that something that when people get the 100-hour training, is that something that you advise them to do or kind of almost implement?
Yeah, so I like the number 6 and 7 has kind of just been a flow for many different programs that I've done over the years, because the 6-week interval is like anybody can do anything for 6 weeks. And so we've had versions of this move through the chakras implemented into like our 6-week challenge. Now it's just implemented into our membership. And so, yes, we do want people to experience it that are not just yoga teachers. And so they don't need to know all the ins and outs of it. But when you walk into the Flow Shala every Monday, there's going to be a new, this is sacral chakra week. This week we did open hip conditioning because it's sacral chakra. So it allows all of the coaches to kind of get on the same page and program design around the specific energetic center that we're focusing on, so that we can have some consistency and skill development versus just randomized classes. Because sometimes when you go to a yoga studio, it's like all the teachers have their own different style and they're all teaching different things and there's no like cohesion. And so by us getting onto this 6-week cycle, it's transformed our membership. People are getting amazing results. And then every 7th week, we do a round of body weight conditioning where people get to do actual like aerobic and anaerobic testing. So yeah, it's really combining like the physiology and the performance aspects of movement coaching with yoga.
That's great, because I feel like your members definitely appreciate the kind of, they almost know what to expect in a way, because I know for me, every time I travel, I like to travel a lot, go to different cities, and I'll go to a new yoga studio. And even through the description, I'm always hit with something that I'm like, I did not expect this kind of experience in here. Even the ones nearby, I think it's great sometimes that different teachers have different things to offer. I mean, we're all human. We're all going to offer something different. But sometimes it's so drastic that it's hard to kind of go in there knowing I want to get this out of my practice, but I'm given something totally different. And of course, when you walk in as a student, it's also your job to create the intention. What am I going to get out of this? What do I want for myself? But again, when it is so drastic, it can be very, very hard to kind of find that flow within. So I'm sure your students really appreciate that. I know that you've obviously started such a great business. Do you have any tips for people that would start opening or that want to start opening up a yoga studio or even an online business?
Sure. So I do have a mentorship program. It's a 100-hour Steel Mace Vinyasa teacher training, and this is the container that I do a lot of this coaching. So I'll share a bit on kind of what we do in there. So a lot of yoga certifications offer just sequencing and learning the poses, and then you might do some practice within that, or you might do some practice hours after. There's not a ton of oversight. It's just kind of like honor system, do your own thing, get out there and teach. And so my mentorship and what I recommend is working with somebody that's really understands the science behind the poses and the science behind, like yoga is a sport in a way, because you're doing movement, and there's a training effect that happens whether or not you want to call it a sport. Like, you become what you practice. And so I think firstly, if you're wanting to start a yoga studio, really understanding on a deep level people's needs around movement conditioning and how to coach a safe class. So first thing would be make sure that you have that layer added in to prevent injury, because a lot of folks will get injured at a yoga studio if their body's not conditioned enough to hold down dog or even hold a push-up or a chaturanga. Those are like the top 3 poses that people get injured in, because they're coming into it without enough shoulder mobility and stability, or not enough arm strength to hold their own body weight up. And so those specific poses I've just noticed can be all over the place. So I'd say when you're thinking about starting a studio, looking at it as like, is this going to be strictly a yoga studio for yogis, people that already understand yoga? Or am I going to create a movement studio where we're non-dogmatic and we're welcoming and we're making it accessible to other folks as well? And then just kind of really designing like the ethos of the community that you want to build. For when I started Flow Shala, it was a lot of journaling, and it was a lot of like a vision of like, culture and connection, and these non-dogmatic methods and this unconventional tool, and making that really like keeping a high bar for movement education. And so these are all kind of the ethos that I built with Flow Shala. And when I got into it, to be honest, I had no idea what it was going to be like. And we almost failed actually in our first year, because I went from running a personal training business where I had about 20 clients that I managed on my own. And then I would travel overseas, and I'd had a couple other trainers that I had mentored, and they would cover some of my sessions when I was gone. But to move from 20 private clients to 115 members took a lot of leveling up in business. And I'm always floored when people try to start a yoga studio with no business coaching, which is pretty much what I did. I like wrote a napkin plan of like, all right, I need a $50,000 loan to buy all the equipment and to open the doors. And I didn't know how to run payroll. I didn't know how to curate a schedule. I didn't know how to run annual membership. So there's just so much behind running a boutique studio. So I had to get some business coaching. So I worked with an organization that helped me learn how to optimize membership enrollments, and ran this like 6-week challenge that was like a comprehensive wellness challenge with nutrition and mindset and the movement piece. And people got amazing results because I created this container where they had to compete against themselves, and they had to attend 3 classes a week, and they had to follow their nutrition. They had to meditate. They signed a contract that said, I'm investing like, it was $600, which was big money back then. Like $600 to do 6 weeks at Flow Shala. And I have to actually commit to my practice of mind, body, and movement. And so by week 3, people were like, whoa, I'm following the nutrition plan, and my gut health is like better, and I have no brain fog, and I feel this energy, and I just like, I'm motivated to come to class. And so it was just by like creating the container for them to have transformation. And they were going through the chakras too, because I had a separate online course. This is pre-pandemic times. I have a bunch of online courses. And so it was like pairing in the mindset, and then like I required you have to meditate 10 minutes a day and journal and come to 3 classes a week and follow this nutrition plan. And you're going to lose either the boutique studio company I was working with is really focused on physique change. And I was floored because I was like, wow, these people are losing like 10 and 20 pounds within 6 weeks just by doing this yoga-based conditioning. Like, this is huge. I've never had this kind of results before in my personal training business. And so, just I'd say my tip would be, if you're thinking about starting a studio, have a transformational program as like an onboarding, because it's kind of like an initiation into your studio. And maybe even if you don't have the Steel Mace Vinyasa skill set, think of how you could curate some form of an intro that's going to give them a high dose of your modality. And you want to get them in there as many days as they can so they can experience change. So we do other intros and things too, but I mean, I could go on for a long time about this. I guess, just getting the coaching, getting the container right, and then annual memberships. Like, that's been a saving grace for us, because then we have predictable income, and our members are committed to long-term growth. So I've actually eliminated class packs. I don't even do class packs at my studio at all. We're a member-based training community, and so I treat it kind of like how boutique fitness gyms or boutique CrossFit studios are member-based, and you can either do the unlimited month or you can do a drop-in for $25, but you're incentivized to do the membership. Either like, you can even start with like a 3-month shorter term membership. It's priced slightly differently, But I found because Steel Mace is so complex and it's a specialized tool, that you're going to get the most out of it if you train frequently and you train long term. And so I think part of like what I'm seeing with as I run this teacher training is that yoga teachers are coming from this from like a mentality of I'm just a yoga teacher and I'm teaching sequences and it's for relaxation. But I think that more and more people that are coming to my training are realizing, whoa, I have this powerful tool at my fingertips that I can create a container for transformation. And so I coach my students to actually design programs for specialized populations that have chronic health conditions. So we are moving more in the direction of, mental health, chronic fatigue, osteoporosis, scoliosis. We do program design for these high needs populations that are not necessarily just the folks you would see in a group class. They're people that really need one-on-one movement coaching to teach them the aspects of, moving the body well, mindset, nutrition. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that definitely answers the question. Thank you for being so thorough. When you touched on the transformation challenge that you have, I feel like that not only helps you and kind of set up a better foundation, but it also helps the students, because it's choosing, hey, I'm putting money into this. When people put money into something, they're like, okay, shit, I actually have to go. I actually have to go through with all of this. And that's at the place I work at now, there's a fitness class before. So a lot of my students do the fitness class, and then they see me walk in, and a lot of times they're like, I wasn't going to stay, but I'm going to stay now that you're here. And then after, they're always like, I'm so happy that I did it. Like, this really helped out. But it's people oftentimes need that external push to really commit to it. So I think that's great for not only you, but for the clients as well. And I saw on your page, and you talked about it a little bit before, that you've traveled all over the place and you've done a bunch of retreats, and that is such a cool lifestyle that you get to live. So that's awesome. What is your favorite part of teaching, specifically retreats and outside of just the normal classes that you teach?
Yeah, so I've really had to look at how many hours a week I have available to do teaching. And so I actually took a break from teaching for 2 years to just focus on my teacher training and getting that container really tight. And I was teaching 4 to 5 classes a week when I was at my max with Flow Shala classes. And this was back before pandemic. We were wall to wall. People were doing the 6-week challenge. They were telling their friends about it. We had a huge thriving member community, and I loved teaching 4 days a week. And then I realized oh my gosh, there's only so much time in a week, and I have 2 kids now. And so I had to really be focused. And so now I taught 1 class a week for the longest time, but I've just added a second. So generally I'm behind the scenes, running the business, and I do my office hours bi-weekly, and I do website and social media audits for my 100-hour students. I'm really focused in on that. And then I actually started curating events with Mark Wildman, who's my colleague, partner in crime in teaching Clubell's Steel Mace and staff work. And so we started, he was in our teacher training as one of our faculty, and we were doing this thing virtually throughout pandemic for about 2 years. And so through working with Mark, I've known Mark for probably 12, 15 years. I met him originally back in the Clubell organization with TACFIT. So Mark and I were all right, we're ready to get in person. We've been doing this virtual thing for a while. Let's create a 2.5-day format where people arrive and they fly here, and they do we do 3 to 4 hours on Friday just to get their hands on the tools and staff and stuff, and they can get oriented to the space. And then we do 2 8-hour days on Saturday, Sunday. And we're seeing people were shifting. They were going from walking in with shoulders rounded forward, kind of shifty eyes, nervous system and sympathetic, to walking out after Sunday at the end of the day warriors, chest proud, they looked accomplished. And so yeah, we've been just playing with this and refining it. We're really big on really program design. So when we look at program design for these 2.5 and 5-day retreats, they go in a progression that is designed to actually change your brain. And so we want people to come in and slowly, bit by bit, get the skills to understand how movement correlates to self-defense and weaponry and loaded asana conditioning and flow state. And so we're just taking them on a journey. It waves itself. It goes staff, then Steel Mace Vinyasa, then heavy clubs, and then back to staff, Steel Mace
Mm-hmm.
Vinyasa Heavy Club. So it's kind of like through this cycle where you're spending about an hour or maybe an hour and a half on each modality and moving through. And there's very little like rest time in between. And then we switch off. So it's he and I, it's like I'm rested and I can come to my next hour segment. He rests during mine. And so we're just like, we've got like 15 years experience teaching this stuff each. And so 30 years combined. And we are probably the world's like most experienced teachers in this. And we really want to help people walk away from these seminars and these retreats with a new perspective on how to move the body and why. Like really deeply, like what was your body designed to do? It's like we are humans, we have thumbs. Our bodies were designed to throw things and to strike things. That's what makes us unique. And that's what, if you look at throughout human history, like that is the thing that makes us different from anybody else in the animal kingdom. And so to really reclaim these, this like ancestral origins of how the body is meant to move, you see people's physiology change. It's rad. So we've mapped out our whole year. We've got 3 retreats that are 5-day intensives. We've got one in Orcas Island happening in August. We have another in Bali in October. We have another in Thailand in early 2024. And then we're going to London next week to do a 2.5-day this February. And then we're researching a castle in Scotland to bring it back to its roots. You know, a lot of the Viking warriors, a lot of the folks out there in that part of the world were literally taking mace and breaking down doors. So we're bringing it to this. Hopefully we'll book this castle. It's a huge estate. It's going to be kind of our bespoke retreat to just into kind of the most rad environments to help people have transformational change.
That sounds so exciting. You're living the life of pioneer, like you said before. I love it, and I'm so excited for you and all that's coming your way. I feel it, and I'm excited. What would you say is your most memorable experience, whether it be from a retreat or maybe just from one of your classes as both a student and a teacher?
Oh my gosh. I'll just draw upon the recent Thailand retreat. So Mark and I took a chance to go to this retreat center that was brand new, and it was actually our friend's property. So it wasn't like a retreat center where, they've been doing a bunch of retreats, with like a big hotel or something. This was like a private retreat center with a hotel that was brand new. It was like literally getting electricity and Wi-Fi like the week before.
Wow.
And we arrived and we kind of were like, okay, is this going to be ready? Like, is this going to work out? And our friend had been investing a bunch of money into this building, this center. So I guess the memory of like, are we going to be able to pull this off? And we're like, yes, we can do this. We can work with it. Once we arrived, we're like, all right, there's electricity. Most of the showers are working, but it was like a high-end boutique retreat center. And we had the whole thing private to ourselves. And then you walk across the street and there was this like pagoda that was like an octagon with like rice fields off in the distance. And then next door to that was the organic restaurant with like, there was bison and, organic gardens and everything. You could like walk out on these little platforms, and we went to temples. And so I'd say the most memorable experience was doing our first 5-day after we'd already workshopped the 2.5 days and just expanding that container of transformation, and hearing our students every single day at that be like, this is the best thing ever. This feels like I'm a kid again. Like I'm playing. I'm so glad I came. And they're just so grateful because they took the time and they invested in themselves and they trained a little bit before, not a ton, but they trained a little bit before coming. And I think just a lot of people are like, we're coming back next year. And we're like, tell your friends. And they're like, no, we just want to keep this to ourselves. We're like, guys, we have room for 20 people next year. Like, just tell your friends. And so, it was just cool to see like day one. Oh gosh. Okay. I just had a wild experience on day one because jet lag is a thing. Do not give your students Thai iced tea after doing a heavy club workout in the sun when they're coming down from jet lag. Let's just say that was so seeing the progression of day one of like people just barely able to like stand up straight to like day 6 of like these people are badass warriors, like swinging staff, swinging clubs, like moving like ninja warriors. It was cool. So that was my favorite memory.
That's awesome. That sounds like so much fun. And what would be your favorite memory as a student? Like something that you were in a class or you were learning something, you were like, shit, I'm taking this with me my whole life.
Yeah, so I actually started practicing yoga, only yoga. I had to actually put my Steel Mace Vinyasa practice or really scale it down when I was pregnant with my second child because my
Mhm.
joints just couldn't handle like a lot of impact, and even just standing in like warrior poses without load was like enough for me. And so
Yeah.
yeah, an experience was I was training with my friend Claire, who owns the Bellingham Yoga Collective, and I was taking a lot of her classes. And I was like, she had a trip coming up to Bali. And so I signed up for it because tickets were really cheap back then. And she was giving me a discount because I was going to bring my baby. And so my partner and I got to split the fee. And so she hooked us up, and she's awesome for that. So I think just taking the time to go to a retreat in Bali as a student, and we spent a month in Bali with my gosh, she was like 7 months old at the time with my daughter, and we traveled around and went to all these other places. And so we really took advantage of the time together to connect as a family. And so it allowed me a lot of space to just observe what a retreat container can look like. And her
Mhm.
container is very different from my container, but I just remember like the dedicated 2 practices a day that she offered really helped me with like my mindset of getting in the rhythm of this is a daily practice. Yoga is a daily practice. Movement is a
Mhm.
daily practice. So yeah, I think just having those times where, you have that moment where you're like, should I go to practice or should I skip it? And it's just like,
Mhm.
just go, just get there, and the teacher will take care of the rest. Even if you lie in Savasana for half of the class, like at least you got there. And now you're like
Mhm.
connected to your breath, and you put your device and your phone down for like an hour or whatever, like just get
Yeah.
there, show up, and take the time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I always tell my students because I work at a gym, so a lot of people come in timid. They're like, but what if I can't do a headstand? And I'm like, I'm not putting you in the headstand. You just started. Don't worry, it's okay. But one thing I always try to tell them is if you want to be in child pose, if you want to be in Shavasana, if you want to sit in a butterfly pose the whole class, I will not judge you. Like no one in this room is going to be worried about you doing what feels best for you. And that's the most important part, just showing up. All you got to do is show up, and then the rest is going to be, it's going to be what it's going to be. And that's really it. So that's great. And I'm glad you had that opportunity. I've been dying to go to Bali. My friend just booked her flight to go, not for a yoga retreat, but she does like dive stuff. So she's taking a month there to do some cool dive videos and work on just like building her online business with scuba stuff. Don't really know what that's about, but I know it's super cool. um, and then the question that I always ask people at the end is if you were to be in front of the entire world and everyone's listening to you and they're paying attention, what would you share with them? You could take a second.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Um, I would ask them, I would say, do you have a flow practice? And if you don't, find more things that put you into a state of flow,
Mm-hmm.
because flow will truly heal your body. If you have, trauma in your body, if you have a fear of expressing yourself, if you have other fears, financial insecurity, scarcity, the more you can get your brain waves and your body into a state of flow, the more you're going to be able to overcome these things that don't serve you. And so I would just encourage anybody that's wanting to get more into flow psychology, the neuroscience of flow, just start researching. There's so many like podcasts and leading writers and authors that are exploring this topic. And that's why I named the studio the Flow Shala. It means house of flow, because I want people to understand the intersection of mind and body. Because oftentimes you go to a personal trainer or a yoga studio for the body stuff, usually a personal
Mm-hmm.
trainer for body, and then you go to your psychologist or therapist for the mind.
Mm-hmm.
But we as movement educators have the opportunity to facilitate a merging of body mind together. And I think it's through the vehicle of flow. And that can be intrinsically rewarding, and it can be very healing and expressive. Like I never thought I would be an artist, and now I do flow arts. Like I actually
Mm-hmm.
do dance performances at the local circus guild, and I have like costumes and everything. And I've been doing that for probably about 4 years. It's really helped me tap into a different layer of creativity for myself and expression, to be able to learn these movements, and just very freeing and very empowering.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I love that. That's definitely going to stay in my mind the rest of the day. I already feel from talking to you just like a calming, flowing energy. So you definitely exude what you preach, which is very rare and very beautiful to experience. So I want to say thank you so much for joining me, for teaching me so much. I got a lot to soak in. There's going to be a lot that I'm going to be researching. Do you have any Steel Mace videos on YouTube?
Yeah, so the places you can find my work, YouTube's a good starting point. So search Summer Huntington on YouTube, subscribe. I try to put out new content on there quite often, and lots of like testimonials and in visuals and like teaching tutorials. But the second best place, the best place honestly is going to be going to Flow Shala and try like a month unlimited flow. We have like a 30-day flow challenge that's happening now, and usually there's some version of like a month unlimited, and try to come as many times as you can in a month and just see how it impacts your regular yoga practice or other things that you do. Yeah, and Gabriella, I definitely am going to hook you up with a month of training with us at the virtual studio. And we are a hybrid studio, so we actually coach you. Like, we have a big screen and there's like a grid, and our coaches are trained to actually identify power leakages and give you real coaching cues in real time. And so it's a little different than some yoga studios where you just watch a video recording and nobody's there on the other end. It's like, here you feel the energy of like the coach knows you by name. They know your injuries. They know where you're coming from. Like, they truly want you to be successful and grow. We're very growth oriented. And I do have a bunch of online courses on the Flow Shala website, but those are more for our teachers in training. So yeah, I'd say just start with actual virtual coaching or on demand. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I really want to do one. So thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. And where else can people find you besides YouTube and the website, or are those the main places?
I have Instagram, so you can find me on Summer Huntington on Instagram, and then I have Flow Shala Instagram too. Send me a DM. I have probably 100 DMs going at any given time, generally about the teacher training and then my embodying flow coaching, which is like a somatics-based program that I have curated, where it's helping people really map the empowerment piece of how the Steel Mace transfers into empowerment, especially in female-bodied folks.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. Very grateful to have met you, to have spoken to you, to have learned so much. And good luck with all of your retreats and all of your experiences.
Thanks, Gabriella. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I look forward to watching this and sharing it out on our channels as well.
Of course. Thank you.